Greetings, everyone. My name is Ibini Eyisharilu. I'm going to be discussing about vowelizing of Paleo Hebrew. I'm going to be teaching on understanding the history of Paleo Hebrew and what happened to the language. Now, the question I'd want to ask to start off is, have you ever wondered what language the Most High created in? What language did he employ to create the heavens and the earth and all that therein is? And when he created everything, what language did he communicate in when he was talking to Adam? What language did Adam speak to his wife, Eve? These are very essential questions that help us to understand what the history of the world really is. What language was the world made in? When Adam was naming all the creatures, what language did he employ to name those creatures? Well, we believe here that the language is Paleo Hebrew. The language has been lost since 135 AD during the Babkova revolt. And we believe now that the language has been restored. We believe we found the people that speak the language or speak a variation of the language. And we believe that those people who speak a variation of the language are the lost sheep of the house of Israel. To this end, we created the Eyisharilu Foundation. And the foundation is tasked with the duty of getting this information to every Yoruba son and daughter, those that are within the West African country called Nigeria, and those that are in diaspora, taken during the transatlantic and trans-Saharan slave trade. These are all sons and daughters of Yoruba people. And the duty of the foundation is to locate them where they are and make sure that they get this information. We believe it is time for the gathering of the children of Eyisharilu. Eyisharilu meaning today Israel. Eyisharilu is simply Eyi, this one. Oshiare is a prince. Elu is a prince with Elu. So this one is a prince with Elu, which was what the angel told Jacob when he changed his name. We're going to run through this presentation. It's a foundation for the decoding of Paleo Hebrew. We're going to be showing you the Paleo Hebrew text, and we're going to be vowelizing the Paleo Hebrew text and comparing our results with the King James Version of the Bible. So this is just a foundation. This is just to get you ready for the main work. The main work is going to be in part 2 when we're decoding Paleo Hebrew. Introduction to Paleo Hebrew. So Zephaniah 3:9 reads, and I quote, "For then will I turn to the people a pure language, that they may call upon the name of the Lord to serve him with one accord." At this time, the prophet Zephaniah had noticed that the language of the people had been diluted. The language that the Hebrews were speaking had been diluted. They weren't speaking the original Paleo language anymore. And so the prophet had looked into the future, and the Most High had said to him that he would turn again the language back, the original language of creation back to the people. He will restore the original language of creation to his people. And that the time for that restoration will be happening towards the end of the world. In Genesis chapter 11 verse 1, it reads, and I quote, "And the whole earth was of one language and of one speech." In a couple of verses after, we read that the Most High divided the language of the peoples because mankind had become mischievous. And he needed for them to be separated in terms of their languages, because now they had gotten to a point where their imagination was making them do things that they were not designed to do. But then when the language was divided, all nations started to speak their languages. The language further was diluted when the Hebrews who spoke the original language at the time, when they were taken at the Assyrian captivity, and when they went into Babylon, the Babylonian slavery, when they were taken by the king Nebuchadnezzar. And so by interacting with other cultures, the language had been diluted to the point where it wasn't probably recognizable anymore. But then the prophet, under the inspiration of the Most High, in Zephaniah 3:9, talked about the restoration of the language. The Bible records that the name of the Lord is a strong tower. The righteous will run into it and they will be saved. This was the restoration. At the end of the world, the name of the Most High will be restored in its original version, and men will call upon it and they will be saved. The history of the language. In 135 AD, Emperor Hadrian decided to ransack Judea and Jerusalem. Before that, in 70 AD, General Titus, the son of General Vespasian, who became the Roman emperor, also decided to ransack the temple. It was in fulfillment of the prophecy of the Messiah when he said, "One stone shall not be left upon another." The temple was completely burnt, but people still inhabited Judea. The Hebrews were still living in their land at the time. A lot of them had fled, a lot of them had been dispersed, but there was still a pocket of people that were living there. But in 135 AD, Emperor Hadrian brought half of his army, of the Roman army, to Judea to completely sack Judea. Houses were burnt, places were looted, the entire place was razed to the ground. This was the last time that Hebrew was recorded to be a language. So at this time, the people had fled where their legs could take them. Zephaniah chapter 3 verse 10 talks about them fleeing beyond the rivers of Ethiopia. And so you'd find a lot of our people in Zambia, you'd find a lot of our people in Zimbabwe, the Lemba tribe, but most of the people that migrated and migrated in pockets actually migrated to West Africa. So at that time, 135 AD, what was known as the Hebrew language ceased to exist. Nobody knew where the people fled to, and nobody knows who a Hebrew is today. That's why the Bible says that they were scattered into all nations. To scatter something is to fling it abroad, to spread it abroad. And when something is spread abroad in that manner, nobody can pick it back. In fact, the Hebrews themselves do not even know that they're Hebrews today, which is the perfect way to hide them. In scattering them, they're hidden from the world. So there are not too many people that know who they are. But the prophecy says that at the end of the days, the Most High was going to gather his people again. So let's read. We did a search on a Google search, and the search criteria was, is Paleo Hebrew a lost language? Let's read what the Google AI overview says. Yes, Paleo Hebrew is a lost language in the sense that it is no longer spoken or used as a primary language for writing. While the Paleo Hebrew alphabet was used for inscriptions and some writing around 1000 BCE, it was replaced by Aramaic-derived square Hebrew alphabet after the Babylonian exile. The Paleo Hebrew script itself is also no longer used in modern times. Another Google search, is Paleo Hebrew a lost language, reveals this to us from Wikipedia. Hebrew ceased to be a regular spoken language sometime between 200 and 400 Common Era CE, as it declined in the aftermath of the unsuccessful Bar Kokhba revolt, which was carried out against the Roman Empire by the Jews of Judea. So in saying all these things, we begin to realize that at some point, the language died, and died completely. It ceased to be a recognizable language. Nobody knew what it sounded like because the people that could read it had stopped existing on their land. They had been flung into various places of the world, and the last thing they must have carried around them was the Hebrew pamphlets. A dead language revived. Like we said, Zephaniah had prophesied that the language had to be revived. He was saying this when he was quoting Zephaniah chapter 3 verse 9. It had to be revived because the strength of the resurrection of the people of Judea and of the people of Israel lies in their language. How did this language die? Like we said earlier, the people were taken captive into many nations and into many cultures. First and foremost, they went into Egypt, the land of bondage, and they would have interacted with a lot of Egyptian text and the way the Egyptians spoke, and that would have been a first dilution. The second dilution, second wave of dilution, would also have been when the people came into the land of Canaan, but did not conquer the Canaanites completely. So you had the Jebusites still in the land, you had the Perizzites still in the land, you had the Girgashites still in the land. And so because they were living in proximity to one another, the languages of the people of those lands would have influenced Paleo-Hebrew and would have diluted it significantly. Then in 786 BC, the Assyrian conquered the northern kingdom, and they were taken into Assyria. How they were taken into Assyria, where they went into Assyria, how far flung they were driven in Assyria, nobody knows till today. What we know is that the Assyrians pillaged them and scattered them, and the Assyrians brought new people from different lands and settled them in Israel. So the people that are in Samaria, which was the capital of northern Israel, are not original Israelites. So when we find the land, one of the things we need to know is that there would be peoples in pockets of that land, but the people that are in pockets of that land today were people that the Assyrians brought into that land to live in that land. That's in the book of Kings. So what you'd find with the Hebrews is, during the time after the 135 Bar Kokhba revolt, before that time, they had also gone into the Babylonian captivity, and they stayed in Babylon for 70 years. You would agree with me that if a nation were living in a foreign nation for 70 years, the likelihood is that they would be speaking more of the language of the nation where they're held captive than they will be speaking their language. And at this time, Paleo had been so diluted. The original Hebrew language had been so diluted. And that's why Prophet Zechariah prophesied that the Most High, who created Paleo itself, is going to restore Paleo. Now, if he created Paleo, created the world using Paleo, if Paleo was his original language, what it means is that Paleo is a language that is spoken in heaven. And that also means that Paleo is a language that every creation should understand, because every creation was formed and was made through Paleo-Hebrew language. So this is how the language died. It died by association, and it died by the fact that we're taken into slavery. The last wave of the death of the language was when they scattered after the 135 AD Bar Kokhba revolt, when they were scattered into West Africa and into all parts of Africa. At that time, they were going into lands that they did not know, to meet people that they did not know. And in getting into those lands, they had to get themselves acquainted with the land. They had to trade in the land. They had to feed from the land. They had to do their daily work in the land. So it had only made sense for them to understand the languages of those lands so that they can communicate and make commerce and survive. So with all these influences, foreign influences, one would realize that the language could never have remained the same. The prophecy of its restoration. The Creator had said that he was going to restore the language. If he has said that he was going to restore the language, we need to believe that he has the power to restore the language. Because the Bible records that the name of the Lord is a strong tower. The righteous run into it and they are saved. In the name of the Lord is salvation. As many as call on the name of the Lord, they shall be saved. So he's prophesied that language which was dead must indeed come back to life again, so that the sons and daughters of Abraham can call on that name and receive salvation. How it was revived. Now this is prophecy being fulfilled. My name is Ibini Eyi Sharilu, and during the night hours in 2022, I was sleeping, and in my sleep, a voice started to speak to me. The voice cried out 3 times, Manora, Manora, Manora. Then it said, Amuinoru, 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 and I woke up. And that was the beginning of this journey. I came to find out that all Paleo words were written in consonants. All Paleo words were written in consonants. There were no vowels attached to it. So it was almost impossible for anybody to be able to read it. Now, what makes a people? A people are identified when they have a common language, when they have a common culture, and when they live upon a common land. You see, the language and the culture are intertwined. They go hand in hand. The language helps to express the culture helps to create the language. So you can't remove a people's language from a people's culture. When you have a culture, the expression of the culture is a language. When you have a language, the interpretation of the language is in the culture. So they work hand in hand. To find a people, to identify a class of people or a group of people, they must have a common language, they must have a common culture, and then they must have a common geographical space, a common territory, and a common land. That way, they are homogeneous. They are one body and they grow together, they prosper together, they trade together, they increase together, and they war together to defend their own territorial integrity. Now, we're going to try to sound out Paleo Hebrew and teach you how to sound out Paleo Hebrew. This next page, we have the consonants of Paleo Hebrew, we have the words of Paleo Hebrew, and we have the meaning of those words in Paleo Hebrew. So the first consonant we have is B, R, S, H, and T. The SH is the shin, so it's meant to be one word. Now, the current modern day Hebrew called this word Bereshit, and it means the beginning of. Now, Bereshit, if you look at it, is a word that has been sounded out. When you look at Bereshit and you sound out the consonants, you get Beresht, 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 and easily you call it Bereshit. But if a language was created as a matrix, if a language was created in consonants for it to be a secret language, I do not think that the Most High would expect the decoding of that language to come by somebody sounding out that language. Anybody can sound it out. So there's no science to sounding out the language. The next word is Barak. The consonant is BRK, and it means blessing or to kneel. The next word is Bakar, BKH, to weep. Then Berek, BRK again, to kneel. And then Shub is SHB, Shb, to come back or to return. Sound out Shb, Shb, Shub, Shub. They could have called it Shub, they could have called it Shuba, they could have called it Shiba by sounding it out. But when you sound it out in its appropriate format and in a language that would give you the meaning of the word itself, Bereshit in Yoruba would then be Ibereisheti. Ibereishe is the beginning of something, the beginning of the start or the beginning of something. Let's try Barak. Barak means blessing or to kneel. The same consonant, BRK, means blessing or to kneel, which are two diverse words. Barak, Iburekun. Iburekun. Till today, the Yorubas call blessing Ibukun. But you see, what we realize is that Ibukun simply means to fill something to the brim. So what are you feeling? Wale buya kunyo. Wale bola kunyo. Wale buye kunyo. So for it to be blessing, it has to be ibuire kun. In blessing in Yoruba is ire or ere. Ere is actually increase. So I can say ibuire kun. But in Yoruba, it will be ibuire kun, obure kunyo. Ire is blessing. But the same word is to kneel. So how do we achieve that same word, to kneel? In their own science, what they have done is put two A's there. And that's what you'd find in most of the words that they've done, just put two A's there. But when you look at barak here, to kneel means iba orukun. Iba orukun, iba is to bend, to divide. To orukun is to divide the knee. So orukun in Yoruba is knee. So the word barak is iburekun for blessing, and then iba orukun is to kneel. To ba orukun, your orukun is straight when you're walking. It is when you divide your orukun that it becomes, that you get into the position of kneeling down. What about baka, BKH? They just put A there. They call it baka. How can this be a matrix or a mysterious language if I'm allowed to just put A-A-E-E? And baka means to weep. And I'm sure that by now, some Yoruba children will be able to tell me what baka is. O buekun niyen, ibuekun ha, o buekun, ibuekun ha, which means to cry. Omo ede buekun, that's what we say in Yoruba. Then berek, now because they can't have three words mean blessing and to kneel, and to kneel, the knee in Yoruba is now iba or the orukun, ibi orukun. Ibi orukun is the knee. Today we just call it orukun. So it's ibu orukun, that's the knee. Then shub. Shub is to come back or to return. Ishe aboniyen. Ishe alo is to go. Ishe abo is to return. Mumbo in Yoruba will say mumbo. Now, one thing we need to know is that in Yoruba is this. There's a statement that used to be made in the olden days. Gbogbo ni ishe ni ile Yoruba. So you'll find Yorubas will say, because it's a verbal language, you'll find Yorubas will say, ki lo nse, kini ise, se ti se, a fe se, because every verb, the word verb in Yoruba means ishe. A doing or an action means ishe. So ishe, the sh ishe is always there in most of the words, especially when it is expressing what somebody is doing. So ishe onwabo or ishe abo means the doing of returning. Ishe alo means the doing of going. Paleo Hebrew is a verbal language. So we just touched on the idea now that Paleo Hebrew is a verbal language. This is expressed in a Google search, AI overview, Google search result, and it says, yes, the search criteria is, Hebrew is a language based on verbs. The answer is this. Yes, Hebrew is primarily a verbal language. According to Hebrew for Christians, biblical Hebrew is heavily based on verbs, with an average verse containing at least 3 verbs. This is because verbs in Hebrew are derived from a 3-consonant root, which encodes the basic meaning of the verb. So, let me go back here and continue the conversation. Yoruba is also a verbal language. But before we go into the notion that Yoruba is a verbal language, the easiest way to identify things and to name things is to name them by their actions. For you would find that all creation or all creatures have their specific characteristics. They have their specific nature. If you name them after their nature and their creation, you'll be naming them specifically on what they are, on who they are. It would not be an arbitrary naming. For example, today the cock in Yoruba is called akuko. The reason why they call it akuko is because it goes kuko, the action that it does, that which does kuko. Another bird, which is like a dove but not a dove, is called odere koko. Why? Because every single day the bird keeps happening. Odere koko, odere koko. And so they call it odere koko. So that way, no two things do what odere koko do, And no two things do what the cock does by cuckoo. So it's giving a specific name based on its characteristics, which obviously makes a lot of sense, and which obviously would have been the way Adam would have named all creation. Just by observing them, this is what this one does. Ishe ele, ishe eyi lele, ishe eyi lele, ishe eyi lele. That way, I can't come tomorrow and name a creation Ibini or a creation Eyi Sharelu because I discovered it. No. I now take ownership of that creation. Africa was somebody's name. Until today, it is called Africa because of a man called Africanus. But that's not the name of the land. So, but if a land and a people and animals are given names based on their characteristics, it's more identifiable. So you find Yoruba is also it's a language based on verbs, which is why you find Ishe in everything that the Yorubas are doing. And if you want to look at how Yoruba names are formed, it is an amalgamation or a coming together of small words, small verbs to form somebody's name. How to decode the matrix? Well, at this time, this matrix called Paleo Hebrew is essentially consonants dropping in from the sky, arranged in a format that the trained mind can decode. But because it is a matrix, it can only be deciphered in one language. There's no point making Paleo Hebrew a matrix and then taking 100 languages and decoding that language and decoding Paleo in all 100 languages. It wouldn't make sense. So you were going to have to look for a language where if we add the appropriate words and bring those words together, we would ultimately find that the interpretation of those words would form exactly the interpretation that Paleo forms. And we find that the King James Version of the Bible is probably the translation that best depicts what we're trying to achieve. So, as a matrix, like we said, it can only be decoded with one language. Now, the 21 vowels of the Yoruba language makes it more appropriate as a tool for decoding the matrix. The reason why we said this is this. Most languages have 5 consonants. Some have 7 consonants. Some have 11 consonants. We don't want to mention the names. But Yoruba as a language has 21 consonants. So you'll find that it's the most tonally rich language known to man. Now, the descriptive nature of the Yoruba language and the way its words are formed gives a lot more latitude for the decoding of Paleo. Like we said, my name, for example, is Ibini. Ibini means Ibieni. We say Ibikunle, which means the house is filled with a lot of children, a lot of birth. So Ibieni is somebody's son, which is the Ben in modern day Hebrew. If you look at Paleo, a child means BN. Ibini niye, Ibieni, my son, Ibimiri, this is my child. Now, understanding that each Paleo consonant is a word gives more depth to the meaning of the complete word. This means that each Paleo word is comprised of a number of short Yoruba words. Like I said now, Ibi and Eni come together to form Ibieni, and when you're going to smoothen it out, Ibini. Toluwa lope, ti Oluwa ni ope. So you'll find when you bring that together, different short words, when you bring it together, it says Toluwa lope. So that's how Yoruba words are formed. The word you're looking for, the name you're looking for is Toluwa lope. But how to achieve it is T, L, N, P. And N in Yoruba is interchangeable with L when you're making a sentence. So what you're having is T, L, L, P, Toluwa lope. Sorry, there's a W there. So it's TLWLP. Ti Oluwa Lope Ti Oluwa. So the word Oluwa broken down is Olu Iwa. Olu Iwa. Olu in Yoruba means master, and Iwa means existence or nature or personality or character. So Olu Iwa means the master of creation, the master of existence, and the master of personality, which is why Yoruba children are called Omo Oluwabi. Omo Ti Oluiwabi is what you shorten together to get Omoluabi, which means you are a child of the one who has character. So in other words, you also have character. Then finally it says, in every Paleo word, you'll find a verb, an adjective, and a noun. And so you'll find when you look at the characters properly in Yoruba, and you say Ibaru. Ibaru means to help somebody carry something on the head. The noun is now formed when you put a in front of it, which is alabaru. Sometimes you can put e, so Oluwa can become Eluwa or Eluha. So you can put a or e or o into it, before it. When you put I before it, you're talking about a thing. But when you have a verb, Ibaru, to turn that verb into a noun is alabaru. Ishames. So what you would find is Matthew 5:18, the Messiah said, "For verily I say unto you, till heaven and earth pass, one jot or one tittle shall in no wise pass from the law till all be fulfilled." Now, there is no other language in the world where a jot and a tittle should affect the sentence. At least not very much. So if I was writing something and I wanted to write it, which is why sometimes when you're even typing and you write ought, OT instead of IT, because the O and I are close to each other, the person reading would understand that it was IT you wanted to write when you wrote OT. And that's where the idea of spell check comes in. So even the computer understands what you intend to do and so puts in the appropriate word, because it just makes sense that that's the only other thing, that's the only other alternative available to you. You cannot do that in Yoruba. Ile and ale and ile and oko and oko and oko and oko. The minute you move one ishami, one jot or one tittle, in Yoruba language, it means something completely different. Now, are the ishamis, upper and lower case marks, not what the Messiah was referring to when he mentioned the jots and tittles? We strongly believe so. So we thank you for listening to this presentation. And we hope that you have learned one or two things from what we have said. We will be going into how to decipher the language itself, and we hope this becomes a strong tool in allowing you to understand how we came about the decoding of the language. Thank you.